All right, so after all of my dashboard and student accounts are set up, then I want to give my students their playtime in Dreambox. And after the first 7 days, I want to log in and review my students' information. So when you first log into your Dreambox account, you're going to see this little icon here. To get into the classroom level, I'm going to click on the classroom name in my drawer, and then I'll see that little purple icon appear. So I'm going to do that by going to the Overview tab that I see here and using the drop-down arrow to select the last 7 days. And I select the last 7 days because I always want to go into my dashboard at least once a week to review student data. From setting the last 7 days for my date range, I'll go down to the lessons column and click it once so that I can sort the data from least to greatest. So now the students who have completed the least number of lessons have floated to the top. So I can see, for example, here that Mamie has completed 1 lesson in 17 minutes. So that's really not too far outside of the lesson completion rate that I would actually, I would almost expect her to get 2 lessons, but it's, maybe she was on her way to completing that second lesson. So I can see that Charlie's completed 3 lessons in 28 minutes. So the rest of my students really are completing lessons at a pretty good pace here. So I'm really looking to see if a student has a lot of time in Dreambox and not a lot of lessons completed. That tells me their student may be struggling through a lesson, not completing lessons, or also maybe spending a lot of time in the games portion of the learning environment. Now from here, I want to also take a look to see if students are making progress in the standards that we're covering. So if a student has completed lessons, they should show progress in at least one standard. So I'm a little worried about Mamie here because she completed a lesson, but it shows me that she struggled through the lesson because she didn't actually make forward progress in a standard. So she's actually a kid that I'm going to take a look at here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on her name to get to her account. And I'm actually going to close this navigation pane, the blue navigation pane on the side, so I can see a little bit more information here. And to do that, just as a reminder, I'm going to click on the 3 parallel lines to close that drawer. And just remember, if you want to open it at any time, you're going to go ahead and click the navigation pane to open it up again. And from that navigation pane, just as a reminder, I went into a classroom and then I clicked on one of my students. Okay. All right. So from here, now I'm going to take a look at Mamie and see what she's been up to in Dreambox. And I can do that through these cards here. Each one of these cards represents a lesson that students have been working on in Dreambox. Now there are actually 4 different types of lesson cards that you can see in Dreambox. The first type of lesson card is a lesson group completed. That means that they've completed quite a few lessons, from this student's case, 14 lessons, and they've completed all of the lessons for that lesson group. I can see the codes for the standards on that lesson card, and I can even play a demo version of that, one of the lessons from that lesson group. I might also see a lesson completed card that's going to be noted by green text, also with a green circle and a check mark in it. Now this also is a lesson that was assigned by the teacher. I can see that by that assigned lesson text, as well as this blue notebook with a star on it. That lets me know that the lesson was assigned. Now the next two cards are the types of cards that I'm really looking to see. So this first card is a lesson completed with no demonstrated understanding. So this means that the student really struggled through the lesson, and Dreambox is actually adapting backward after the student completed this lesson. This type of lesson card will actually also have a gray check mark on it. And then finally, I might also see a lesson paused card. This type of card means that a student clicked into the lesson and clicked back out of the lesson before the lesson was completed all the way through. So I do want to go back into that student's account and see if there are any lessons that have a gray check mark or a gray pause button on them. Okay, so immediately I see a gray check mark, which means that she didn't demonstrate understanding on a lesson that I assigned. I also see that I have gray pause buttons. Now I'm going to take a look down at her account and see if I see a series of those. I actually do. I see a series of gray pause buttons, and that lets me know that she has been looking into lessons and playing them for a little bit but not completing them. So the first thing I want to do with this student is to remind her to always finish the lessons that she has opened. Now, if I saw a series of lessons, maybe the same little descriptor on a lesson card, but I noticed that that lesson did not show demonstrated understanding, then I might even want to play a lesson with this student. And it's actually okay to play a lesson if you click on the Play Lesson button from the dashboard, because Streambox is not going to actually track any data on how the student plays through this lesson. So you might want to see how they're engaging with the manipulative to help them solve the problem. I also want to see if they're using the help button or if it's available, if there's like a little hint here too, maybe a little light bulb. There are little light bulbs on some of the little lessons. I also want to see if it's maybe just the math that's getting in the way and if I can provide them with a helpful hint to successfully solve the problem. Now, this is the only time that I would assist students in working through Dreambox is when I click on the Play Lesson button. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and leave this. So I would want to look for these gray cards for any student who has a lot of time in Dreambox and not a lot of lessons completed, or who has completed a lesson but hasn't shown progress in any standards. And by the way, when parents sign up for a parent dashboard account, this is the view of student information that they would see when they log into their family dashboard. I had another fantastic question come through. So does Dreambox ever just send reports, or do we always have to log in to see student information? We do not send reports to you, so you will have to log in to see your student level information. Great question. Thanks you all. I want to thank you all so much for being so interactive on the questions in the chat. It really does help me make sure that you all are following along with me, and I also want to make sure that we answer all of your questions as we go through today's session. So thanks so much and keep it up. So I'm actually just opened up my drawer by clicking on the 3 parallel lines, and now I'm going to go to the classroom level again by clicking on the classroom. And there are a few more pieces of information that I do want to share. So we're going to go to the Overview tab from the Classroom view, and now I'm going to look at Proficiency in the right-hand side of the screen. So proficiency tells me the standards that students have been through or completed all of the content for with demonstrated understanding. So let's take a look at this kindergarten column first. So when it says kindergarten, it says out of 13. That means that Dreambox Learning covers 13 standards with our content. So for example here, Doris has covered 13 out of the 13 kindergarten standards that we cover in Dreambox Learning. When I hover over the number 13, I can see the codes for her for the standards that she covered appear. Doris has also covered or been all the way through 12 of the 14 grade 1 standards and 5 out of the 14 grade 2 standards. So that allows me just to view student progress through the content in Dreambox in a different way. If I want to see what my students and my whole class have been working on most recently, then I can go to the Activity tab, and this allows me to see the lessons that students have been working on recently. Also, if I want to see if there is a particular lesson group that my students are working on in Dreambox, I can go to the What Are My Students Working On section in the right-hand side, and I can see that a lot of my students, 12 of them in fact, are working on identifying more or less up to 100. When I click the drop-down, it lets me see which 12 students are working on this in Dreambox, and then I can see the standards connected to that particular lesson group. Now the next tab is the Standards tab, and it's actually got a couple different views. So the Grid view, allows me to look at all of the standards covered for the grade level that I select. So I can see that these are the standards that Dreambox Learning covers. And now I can scroll down to my class and see which standards my students have worked on. So Doris here has covered all of these standards that are noted by a green indicator. Edmundo has 6 standards that he's currently in progress, or he's got some lessons in his queue that are working on these standards. But he's also got some standards that he hasn't gotten to yet. And there are a couple of reasons why a student may not have gotten to a standard. One, it may just be that the students haven't had enough time to get to that work in Dreambox, or 2, it might be because there's another standard that's more foundational that we're working them through before it's appropriate to put them on this particular standard. Now from this grid view, I can also go to a second view called the grouping view. And I really like to use this view when thinking about flexibly grouping students. So if I go to number and operations in base 10, and let's say that I'm going to be teaching this standard. Okay, so my kids are going to be working on counting to 120. This is immediately going to sort my students according to their experience with this standard. So the students in the standard not started category are the students who haven't completed any lessons for this standard. The students in the standard in progress category are students who've completed at least one lesson with understanding. And by the way, the percent next to their name in this category doesn't mean that that's the percent of their percentage that reflects their understanding. This percentage actually tells me the percentage of the Dreambox learning content for the standard that they've been through with understanding. So Kenneth has been 95.8% of the way through the content for this standard, where Valencia is just starting at 8.3%. Now the last column are the students who are proficient in the standard, and this means they've been through all of this content with demonstrated understanding, and we're moving them on to other content in Dreambox. The roster tab, so if you need to get your usernames and your passwords for your students and have those printed out to kind of help your students get logged in, you can print those out and put those in your sub-plan book or put those in your plan book so you've got them at your fingertips at any time. I do want to go back over the curricular grade again. So that was a question that's just popped up. So if I go into a classroom and then go to the edit button, it's going to take me to I'm going to go to the roster tab, which is the 3rd tab, and curricular grade is the 4th column. Actually, the 5th column. Okay. Thanks so much for asking that fantastic question.